Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, buenos dias. Only at ACTFL do you get a better response to good morning in another language than in English, which is one of my favorite things about ACTFL. Good morning, I'm Meg Malone. I'm the director of the Center for Assessment, Research, and Development at ACTFL, and I'm really pleased to invite you all to ACTFL's Research Plenary 3, which is Research Priorities, Advancing Research for Effective Classroom Practice. We're going to be hearing from 3 of our awardees from 2016. So what's the purpose of the ACTFL Research Priorities? We support empirical research on 6 priority areas that we have identified as currently critical to improving foreign language education. So what are those areas? The first is the integration of language, culture, and content. The second is foreign language teacher development. The third is classroom discourse, what happens in the classroom. The fourth is high-performing language programs, language use in the community, and research on practice in K-16 settings. So one of the purposes of this session is, as a membership organization, we are investing in research. And in addition to these articles eventually being published in our journal, Foreign Language Annals, we also want to give you an opportunity to hear about the research as it develops. In some cases, it's already been published, but in many cases, of course, research takes time. And we want you to understand where we are in it. And in addition, it's really fun to hear our researchers talk about their research in addition to being able to read about it. So I want to find out what we're learning through the Research Priorities grants that ACTFL awards every year. And what's really important is, how do our findings advance classroom practice? How is it helping learning and teaching? And what can we learn from it? And really, what have our colleagues here learned about teaching and learning? So we hope that that's what you get out of this session. We have 3 terrific presentations. Yesterday, 4 of our other research awardees presented, and I'll introduce each of them. The first is Shuling Wu from Southern Illinois University on the implementation and assessment of an international internship program, an exploratory case study. The second is Diego Pasquale Cabo from Texas Tech, and he's looking at pedagogical practices for the linguistic and socio-affective needs of heritage language populations. And then the third is humor in the Spanish as a foreign language classroom. And Masrat Mir is presenting from Illinois State University for herself and her co-publisher. And then at the end, we're going to save questions for the end. I will facilitate the questions. I'll ask you, and I'll tell you again, I'll ask you to state your name and your affiliation, and if you have a specific question for one of our presenters. So without further ado, let's get started with Shuling Wu. And I'm going to let you advance the slides.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for me to present my study. So the title of my study is the Planning, Implementation, and Assessment of an International Internship Program. And I'm Shuling Wu from Southern Illinois University. So the motivation of the study, so it's a practical need for a framework to guide my own program. So in my school, we have an interdisciplinary major. It's called Foreign Language and International Trade. And the students, they major in this specialization. They are required to take Chinese language courses and also a bunch of courses from the College of Business. And before they graduate, they have to take FL 495, its internship course. And this internship course requires them to work 7 weeks full-time in a foreign country where this target language Chinese is used. So, and another motivation for my study is that I've noticed that the practice of international internship actually closely tied to the new ACTFL World Readiness Standards for learning languages. So these standards cover 5 areas, including the traditional communication in 3 modes, and also cultures, can our students interact with cultural competence? And also most importantly, this area, can they use the foreign language to connect with their own discipline? Can they use the foreign language as a tool to absorb information required for their own field, regardless they are engineer or in this case, they are in international trade? And also, can they make a comparison between their own cultures and the target language culture? And can they function well in the international linguistic community? So the benefits of internships has been well documented. So the notable one including the students will be able to apply knowledge and skills in professional settings. So therefore, in the future, there's a better chance that they can find a better job. And also, students will be able to improve skills, such as communication skills, to talk to their supervisors and coworkers, and also report writing, organization of work, information acquisition, and also the ability to operate independently. So it's totally different from the school environment. And then also, for the companies, they also benefit a lot from the temporary staffing. And this is also observed in my study. They really appreciate the intern students' fresh ideas and the perspective. So the study basically will aim for two goals. First is to investigate the planning, implementation, and the learning gains and challenges in an international internship. And the second area will be to assess the effectiveness of this new model, which I propose is to use to support learners' independent linguistic development, professional development, and their personal development through the internship. And my participant and research context, the participant is just one case. The pseudonym here, I use Jean. And also the supervisor is Helen. And the internship site is a company, a stainless steel company in Taiwan. It's a family-run business with about 30 employees. And Helen is the only one who speaks English in this company. And the main job assignment my student receive is to contact prospective customers in North America and also answer phone calls and the regular office jobs, and also to revise the company's websites, and also to create and update and a LinkedIn account, and also to translate some product catalogs. And the methodologies. So there are 3 steps. So before the internship, I met with a student and I collect information about her background. And also I assess her Chinese proficiency before the internship starts. And also I help work with her to identify her learning objectives. And during the internship each week, she is required to complete oral journal each week, and also she self-assess her language use and learning strategies weekly. And also I collect all of the email communications and the product that she completed at work. And then also each week, after she turns in her oral journal, I will follow up with her to conduct a Skype meeting with her to address any questions she may have from her experience. And then after the internship, I conduct the same assessment again, and also ask both the supervisor and the student intern to complete the survey. And so here is the learning objectives that Jean set out for herself. So she said the first goal is by the end of my internship, I will gain a better understanding of Taiwanese workplace culture and identify how this understanding will be useful in my future career in and outside of Taiwan. And also the second area is all about language development. She said, I will stick to a learning schedule to improve Chinese language proficiency in the workplace. And she also named specific areas that she wants to be able to achieve, including to be able to present, to give a presentation about the company in Chinese, and be able to introduce the company's products in Chinese, and also improve her skills in grammar and also about translation. And then, so here are some instruments that I use for my study. So for the oral journals, she is required to follow this DEAL model. It's a model for critical reflection. So the first area is to describe an experience. So, and then the second area, the E, is examination of the experience. And the third step is to articulate how she learned from this experience. And she think about these three steps, all based on the learning objectives that she set up. And then here, each week, she also used these language use and learning strategy questionnaires. So I asked her each week to self-assess how much you use Chinese at work, how much listening, how much speaking, and how much reading. And then she will regularly assess herself, including her use of English too. And then also, she also self-assessed her own learning strategies. So what kind of learning strategy that she used each week, and what is working and what is not working, and which one was best for her. So each week, by the end of the week, she will self-assess herself and think about what to do for the next week and how to help herself to achieve the learning objectives. And then the data analysis. So I have two types of data. The first part is the qualitative analysis. I use the grounded theory, and the tool that I use to analyze the data is Atlas T. So I sort out all the major things and see the interrelationship between the different things. And these are from all the social data that I collected. And also I have qualitative analysis is for the proficiency assessment, and also the oral journals that I collected. I also calculate the percentage of air-free T units. So according to John 2012, based on a large pool of participants, she identified that to differentiate the different proficiency levels for Chinese learners, the best index is this air-free T units. And also, I also do some calculation about the self-assessment of language use and learning strategies. So here is the result. So you can see that the Jean's assessment score, before the internship, she scored 52. And after the internship, she scored 70. And I compare this result with a published study. So that study also uses the same study. And for the low proficiency learners, their average for heritage language learner is 52.9. And for the high proficiency group, they are the third or fourth year Chinese learners. You can see that the improvement for the heritage language learner is about 18 points. And for foreign language learner is 23 points. So you can see the improvement of 18 points after the 7 weeks of internship is equal to 1 year of regular language instruction at the college setting. And then the gains went beyond just the language. She also developed a lot in terms of her professional field. She said that it has allowed me to see what it is like to conduct international trade. And then with this knowledge, I can decide whether or not I want to pursue it as a career. And also, very interestingly, that I found from my study is that she identified the main social challenge actually was the sales jobs itself. She said that I feel I need to improve on my knowledge about the company's product and also learn how to approach the potential customers. And she identified that as the area that she found most challenging. And of course, we also observe language barriers and sometimes miscommunications. Sometimes they had an assigned job and she could not understand and did not really complete the task. They will also observe that. And also, very interestingly, another thing is that the supervisor hadn't actually, at the exit survey, put down that she felt Jane's overall Chinese proficiency was good, but she found that she was very weak in her business language. So she mentioned that she could not say some simple expression that's commonly used in business field, for example, to negotiate price or to make a purchase order in Chinese. And also about language use and learning strategies, the result here based on her own rating and the average. You can see that the language skills that our learners use most frequently at work is listening and speaking. And you can see that handwriting and typing are roughly the same level. And then here is the result of her language learning strategies. So you can see that she spent considerable time talking to her friends and roommates after work. She also spent lots of time talking to her coworkers and supervisors at work. And also she used other kinds of language learning methods. And I calculated the average. So each week, she actually spent about 20 hours on language learning while she is working on the job. And we calculate as a daily average is about 3 hours per day. And as teachers, we can think about how much our students actually learn in classroom and how much they gain through a study abroad program. And the internship could be another promising model. And then so here, I found that this new framework that I set on my students work roughly like this diagram here. So they set out learning objectives, they know what they want to achieve through this internship experience. And each week, they also self-assess their language use and the learning strategies. And both of them help them to engage in critical reflection. And with this critical reflection using the DO model, she formed actions and response. And this, in the end, reinforced the learning objectives. So I see that's how the result, the outcome has been quite positive for this, for Jean's case. And then here is the conclusion. So my study provides a new framework for promoting self-regulated learning in an international internship program, and especially when the supervisor cannot be there with our student. And also, through the analysis, I show that international internship is a very promising way to support the new ACTFL World Readiness Standards. And if you are interested in reading more about my international internship study, you can refer to Foreign Language Annals, issue 53. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? My name is Diego. Before I start, can you hear me well? Yeah. Before I start, I want to thank Meg Malone for the opportunity to present. And you should know that I have an easy job to do. She told me to do 3 things. She told me to prepare a presentation of about 15 slides, send it to her by November 15th, and then be engaging and informative. I didn't do any of the first 2. So I'm hoping at least I'm going to try to be engaging and informative. So at least I can do one of the 3 tasks. All right. As you can see, the original title of my presentation was Pedagogical Practices for the Linguistic and Socioaffective Needs of Spanish Heritage Speakers. For the sake of time, I will only be talking about the socioaffective needs today. And the research I'm going to be talking about is collaborative work that I'm doing with one of my wonderful PhD students. His name is Josh Prada. Okay. So let's start with the working definition of heritage speaker. If you're not familiar with this community, a heritage speaker is a bilingual individual that grows up speaking a language at home which is different from the societal language. So in this case, Spanish in the US would be a hallmark example of a heritage language. Okay. We are advancing our knowledge of heritage speakers a lot, but if there is one word that would define heritage speaker, is that they are heterogeneous. So not 2 heritage speakers are the same. Some can speak, read, write fluently. Others can only speak. Some feel very comfortable using the language, and some are very ashamed. From a strictly linguistic point of view, this is explained due to differences in the quantity and quality of input early on, and also the degree of engagement of educational opportunities later on. From a social point of view, because of these differences with regards to monolingual speakers, they intend to internalize deficit discourse about their heritage language. So the ideas and the discourse that this population keeps saying is, my Spanish is not good enough, and therefore they develop a low linguistic self-esteem. Okay. When they come into the classroom, they tend to enroll in Spanish classes, sharing the space with second language learners. And unfortunately, in most cases, these Spanish classrooms tend to promote a foreign standard variety, which prescriptively points out and penalizes heritage speakers' varieties. Okay. Even though it's probably changing a little bit now, but the current, everybody should agree with me probably that the current status of heritage Spanish today is stigma, prejudice, and discrimination, which translates into the minds of these heritage speakers that being bilingual is a bad thing, which consequently results in a reduced use of Spanish in this population. But not everything is bad news, you know. Even in this environment, later on they recognize the richness and the value associated with their heritage, and they come to the university and they register for classes, trying to connect or reconnect with their language, culture, history, and identity. In recognizing then the heritage speaker as a particular type of student with particular needs, we have come a long way. Now we are an emerging area of research. We study heritage speaker bilingualism from many different perspectives. We now have more resources than have ever had before. And this is allowing us to grow even further. Okay. So considering this very brief presentation, because we only have 15 minutes, and considering the title of my presentation today, remember I'm going to be talking about the socio-affective needs, I could talk about a lot of topics that would allow these heritage speakers to understand and to use these tools to understand who they are and be comfortable in their own skin as bilingual and bicultural individuals. So I could talk about a lot of topics. For example, I could talk about the increasing number of Hispanics in the US, which right now we are about 56, 57 million people, even though not everybody speaks Spanish, but 56, 57 million people, being the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. I could also talk about new hubs of Hispanic communities throughout the US. So now we find large communities of Hispanics where there weren't before. I could also talk about Spanish preceding English in the US, but I won't. Or I could talk about, I would tell the students also that English is not the official language in the US, and this is my breather. An opportunity to ask Meg how I'm doing. Engaging and informative, at least? You're right on time. Okay, right on time, good. All right. So I could talk about all of that. I could also talk about the fact that not all Hispanics in the US are immigrants. And it seems that we forget this information sometimes, and students themselves forget about it. I could talk about the impact of Latino consumers on the US economy and how it's helping the US economy grow, or the Hispanic presence in the media. But I will not be talking about any of this today. Hopefully, it helped a little bit to understand all the issues that the Hispanic community faces today, and understand why I'm looking at the socio-affective needs. Okay. So to address these socio-affective needs, I want to look at the effect of community service learning, CSL henceforth, and how it can impact teaching and learning in the case of heritage speakers. Okay, and the reason for choosing community service learning is because it allows students to actively engage in their community by providing a service, to improve their skills, increase their knowledge, and expand their understanding of a subject. Service learning is our opportunity to allow students to see where theory becomes reality, where learning it's translated into experiencing. Okay. So I have one general research question, which is the following. What are some of the effects of integrating community service learning into Spanish heritage language program? And I'm going to show you interim data analysis from observations and student reflections, because we are still collecting data throughout the semester, and we'll finish in a couple of weeks. Okay. So that you know a little bit about our program, we're Texas Tech University. We have a medium-sized heritage language program with 3 different levels. The service learning requirement is associated with the 3rd level. We have approximately 70 students. Service learning is a required component of the class, but the class itself is not only service learning, so service learning is an addendum to it. The idea is that students complete 10 hours of work in the community per semester. They have the opportunity to go whenever they want, but 2 times a week for 1 hour at a time. And then they have to do a reflection and a digital story by the end of the semester. The task itself is working with elementary school in the Lubbock Independent School District. Lubbock is the city where Texas Tech University is. And this school was chosen because of its large percentage of Hispanic students. So the idea is to connect, really, adult heritage speakers with child heritage speakers. And the reason for this is the following. We know that at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 years old, when heritage children go to school, is when they start realizing that their family speaks weird language, they eat weird food, and they listen to weird music, and they realize that society in general speaks English and lives in an English culture. So from that moment on, whether consciously or unconsciously, what they're doing is they tend to reject their home culture and associate themselves more and more with the home dominant culture. So our goal was for them to become role models of these children, to let them know that you can be bilingual, you can be Hispanic, you can be bilingual, you can be bicultural, and still be successful and go to college. Because many times what happens is that the people that these children know that speak Spanish do not go to college, and the people that they know that go to college don't speak Spanish, and vice versa. Okay. So the general goals of the service learning component was to connect Texas Tech University with the community, to legitimize Spanish in the US, and to afford students the opportunity to use Spanish in new contexts. Particularly for this class and for this program, it's to connect, as I said before, to connect child and adult heritage speakers, to normalize the use of Spanish, US Spanish, and also to develop literacy in the heritage language, both for children and for adults. And these are some cute pictures. Another breather. I'm doing okay? I'm doing okay. Some cute pictures of these children and my wonderful instructors helping. Again, remember, they go twice a week for 1 hour at a time after school. For these children, they do not know that this is service learning. For them, it's an after-school Spanish club. We provide them with snacks. We provide them with books and materials. I should have said before that the school is a highly Hispanic percentage student body. And probably the reason for this is because it's in the poorest or less advantaged part of the city. Later on in the semester, we invite them over to campus so that they get a first-hand experience of what it is to be in our university. This was recently at the Dia de los Muertos celebration. Most of them, it was the first time that they came to campus. Again, remember, one of the ideas was for the adult heritage speakers to role model for the children. Okay, so based on the observations, ethnographic observations, and the student reflections, we observed three trends emerge. The first one is what we refer to as objectives alignment. The second one is role modeling as a teaching strategy. And the third one is heritage speaker resilience. I'm sorry. All right. As for objectives alignment, early on in the semester, we came to the realization that the goals that we have for our adult heritage speakers in our heritage language classes are very different from the goals that these children have in their own classes. So for us, we try to address both the linguistic and the socioaffective needs. But for Harwell Elementary children, they have to follow a mandated Spanish curriculum from the state of Texas. And basically what they see is that Spanish for them is a foreign language. It's taught as a foreign language, even though these children's probably the first and only language to that moment. So by bringing adult students into the lives of these children, we saw right away that the linguistic needs were aligned, that the literacy links were aligned, but we were able to provide these children with a socioaffective component that they don't have. For them, they don't have that kind of support that would allow them to maintain Spanish in the future. The second one is the one that we were expecting, role modeling as a teaching strategy. Students engage in intergenerational collaborations. Adult students recognize themselves in kids and vice versa. What we weren't expecting is that the adults were also very inspired by the children. So for instance, 3 Harwell students, these are some of our observations. 3 Harwell students have Texas Tech gear today. They showed us the gear saying that it is cool stuff. They really admire the TTU students. Another quote is, the Harwell students love them. They have to relate to the way they relate to the TTU students is clearly like an older brother or sister. The way they talk about them during the interviews reveals great inspiration. Thank you. And last, heritage speaker resilience. So during the community service learning, adult students reassess their skills through hands-on experience with children. Children show Texas Tech students about the importance of early onset of bilingual education, not only affecting but also inspiring choices regarding the education of their future children. What we mean by this word is the fact that they come to the realization that they are in school to learn something that they should know by then. For them, coming to school is resilience. All right, so to conclude, putting this all together, I hope you consider community service learning for your classes because it connects the class with the community, not just linguistically, but also culturally and socio-affectively. It's an ideal framework where language learning connects social justice, identity, and sociolinguistic awareness. Students can challenge dominant language ideologies and become agents of change. They develop positive linguistic and cultural identities and expand vocabulary and context of languages. Thank you.
My name is Montserrat Mir. I'll be talking today about humor in the Spanish foreign language classroom. Thank you very much for coming. My collaborator, Rachel Shively, is my colleague at Illinois State University, and she is not able to be here today. Oops, sorry. We are interested in the use of humor in the foreign language classroom, in the Spanish foreign language classroom, and there's a lot of research already about humor in the foreign language classroom. We know that humor appears in the classroom interwoven in pedagogical tasks and topics. We also know that humor can help in negotiating turns in the classroom discourse. The students define different roles using humor as well. They are able to engage in more meaningful interaction with other students and with the teachers using humor. And also, this second language humor has some social functions in the classroom discourse. We can see students maintaining faith through the use of humor or creating new identities in the classroom. We also know that humor can help in facilitating learning in certain regards. And it's not only in just general classroom, but in the second language classroom as well. So there's a lot of research out there, but the number of studies in the use of humor in the second language classroom is quite limited yet. And that's why we decided to add to what we already know. And we have 3 questions in our investigation. What are the forms and functions of a spontaneous verbal humor in teacher-student interactions in the Spanish as a foreign language classroom? How do teachers and students make their humor comprehensible to each other? And how do teachers themselves view humor in the classroom? We had 15 Spanish instructors. These are teaching assistants in our university. They were all teaching first-year Spanish classes, first or second semester. The data comes from video recorded sessions. We recorded approximately 3 or 4 sessions per instructor. So our corpora is approximately 48 hours of video recording. And we focus on teacher-fronted interactions. So we did not pay attention to the teachers' discourse as they were talking to individual students, like as they were walking in the classroom. And we also conducted semi-structured interviews with these instructors. We also did an OPI. I am a certified OPI tester, so I conducted OPIs with every single instructor except 2 of them who were native speakers of the language. And in terms of the analysis, we first identified humor sequences. They were transcribed, and they were analyzed looking at several factors. We look at the target of humor. We look at who initiated humor. It was the instructor or the student, the social function of the humor in the classroom, etc. And the interviews were analyzed qualitatively to see how the teachers view the use of humor in the classroom. So I'm going to be showing some samples of classroom discourse. They're in Spanish, but I will be translating them into English. First, I want to point out that these are just preliminary results. We're still transcribing some data, and that's why you see some empty cells there. The teaching level 1 corresponds to the first semester of Spanish at the college level. Number 2, second semester of Spanish. And the proficiency level based on the OPIs. The humorous sequences appear to the right. In red, these mean the red numbers correspond to student-initiated humor sequences. So for example, in the case of Lauren, that we found 11 humorous sequences in her data, 1 of them is a student-initiated, and the other 10 are teacher-initiated. So based on these results, we cannot, and we don't plan to venture any generalizations about how the language proficiency of the instructors impact on the number of humorous sequences, because our data, the numbers are pretty small, even though you can maybe see some patterns there. So here's some of the examples. So this is the first one. Here we have Arthur. Arthur was an advanced law teacher. And in this particular example, he's starting the classroom. So he's like warming up just by asking the students what they're going to do for the weekend. And then he asked one student in line 16, okay, are you going to go out? And the student said yes. 18, are you going to go out to drink? And the student responds no and laughs. And Arthur asks, are you going on a date? And the student is like thinking about it in 21. And in 22, then the teacher says, a romantic date. And his eyebrows go like, looking at the student like, a romantic date. And the teacher says no and starts laughing. So here we have a case where the teacher is using humor just to establish, to get closer to the students, to create a community with the students. And using not only language, but also there's a non-linguistic language, the use of his eyebrows that added to the humor intent. And so the student, and all the students react to the humor. The students immediately understand that in line 20 was a regular question, line 22, it was a teasing. The teacher was really teasing the student, and everyone reacted to that tease. Here we have another one with Helen. Helen was also an advanced law instructor in terms of her proficiency. And in this particular example, the students were in pairs, first working on suggestions to do in different states. So the teacher gave each group of students different states of the United States, and the students had to come up with suggestions of what people could do there using commands. So they were practicing commands. Now the activity is over, and the teacher is bringing the activity to a closure. So she asked one student, a group of students in line 7 at the end, what are we going to do in Florida? What can we do in Florida? And the student in 8 says, fish at the Gulf of Mexico. And number 10, okay, fish in the Gulf of Mexico, very good. Use the vocabulary, you have to use the vocabulary. Another one, in 11, and this is used with the language. The student says, ve a los cocodrilos, see the crocodiles. That's what the student is trying to say. Now Helen, the teacher, says, what? Ve, no necesitamos A. You don't need A. Ve los and the teacher actually has a problem pronouncing the word cocodrilos. So the teacher said, ve los crocodiles. You see the crocodiles? See the crocodiles? Ver o ir. See or go. And the student says, sí. And the teacher in number 14 says, sí, okay, ver los cocodrilos. No vamos a los cocodrilos. We don't go to the crocodiles. And actually, when she's saying that, she uses nonverbal language, and she goes, no go a los cocodrilos, to make sure that the students understood the distinction. And in line 16, she adds, I am not going to the crocodiles. Perhaps you go. And everyone laughs. And then they go on with more suggestions. So here, the instructor, Helen, uses error correction, uses humor to facilitate error correction and to point to form, to just make the language more noticeable or salient to the students. Okay, here we have Karen. Karen is an intermediate high teacher. In her OPI, she got an intermediate high level of proficiency. And here is a very highly structured exercise. The students had sort of like sentences with a blank in between, and they were supposed to finish that or complete that sentence using people, like a number in line 12 at the end. He says, mi o mis me critican. So there's supposed to be a blank between me or mis. My blank criticize me. And the students were supposed to say who, right? So they were supposed to come up with people that criticized them. So she's going through those answers. So it's a very highly structured exercise, and is a typical IRF sequence: initiation, response, and feedback. So the student responds to 13, father, and in 14, father, and 15, mother. And the teacher in 16, mother, of course she does. The men with the father and women, the mother, right? And everyone laughs. And then she goes on in that feedback turn to the students, adding self-denigrating humor in a way by pointing to herself and said, my mother criticized me all the time, and everyone laughs. And she continues, the clothing, my studies, and then she switches to English. You're so lazy. Why do you do this? I mean, like mimicking her mother. So in the feedback response, we see that she's using humor to make the class more enjoyable, to just break the routine of this going question, answers, because she's going through a very highly structured exercise. Okay, we have a here student-initiated humor. And in this particular case, we have Lauren. The students are asking, they are talking about, they're going to be talking about traveling, and she's introducing the topic by asking the students what they're going to do in spring break. And in number 3, is anyone going to travel? And number 5, a trip, where are you going? The student says Houston, and the teacher, Houston, what's in Houston in number 7, and in number 10, a student says the sun. And interestingly enough, this student is not the student that Lauren was interacting with. So the student, another student in the classroom responds with this humorous response. And the teacher, confirms the joking comment and said, oh yes, a little bit of heat there, that's good. So once again, we see this, it's interesting to see that the students themselves are contributing to the humor in the classroom. Another student-initiated humor sequence, we have Helen here. She's asking the students places. They have a series of activities, and they have to mention places in the town where they can do these activities. And one of the activities was to chat, just to talk with your friends. And they will mention places, Panera, number 3. And someone says Coffee Hound, which is a very popular coffee shop in our town. And Helen says, Coffee Hound, I love Coffee Hound, in number 11. Mexican mocha, oh, it's so good, I love it, and everyone laughs. And Helen goes, in 13, she continues, I love it, but it has a lot of energy afterwards, right? A lot of energy. And the students, one of the students responds like, you don't need it. and adding to the humorous response there and to the humor in the classroom. Okay, teachers' perspectives. What do teachers say about humor, the use of humor? Some students, some of the teachers comment on the use of humor to facilitate learning. Here's a quote. "I do try to be humorous as much as I can. It's because this type of thing sticks in people's head. If you laugh at it, then you've probably processed it. And then you can think about it enough to laugh at it." Also, teachers comment on the use of humor to establish rapport. Kirk was a teaching assistant who had 2 years of experience teaching in the high school. All the other teaching assistants were novice teachers. And he, in this quote, he really points out the fact that at the beginning he didn't want to establish humor, to establish his position as a teacher, but later on he introduces humor to just get closer. Also, some teachers say that they use humor to, or they think of using humor to make the class more engaging and enjoyable. In Beth, the bottom one, she says that she uses it so the students do not zone out. So, and she actively looks at the classroom, and if she sees the students are like sleepy, then she really adds humor into the classroom. Kirk also says that uses humor to benefit those students in the classroom who are in a higher level, because he assumes that some students may be at a lower level and would not understand humor, so sometimes he uses humor just to do that. Okay, so the conclusions. We know that teachers and students use humor in teacher-fronted interactions. We also know that in these data, humor was often incorporated in these highly structured exercises with the IRF sequences. We know that teachers and students tend to use very simple, humorous utterances. With high proficiency teachers, we see that the students use a little bit more sophisticated humor. Like, for example, they use wordplay. They use nonverbal language to facilitate comprehension. And the teachers believe that humor can help establish rapport with the students and facilitate learning. So for language teaching, what are the implications? We believe that even in beginning language learning, teachers and listeners can engage in humor. Humor may encourage learners to be engaged in the classroom. Humor can build that closer relationship with the students, between teachers and students. It can facilitate learning by making forms more memorable or salient. And finally, the encouraging humor in the classroom may aid in the development of pragmatic competence. We have noticed that if the teacher uses humor, the students may be more likely to use humor. Thank you.
Thank you to all our presenters. When you spend as much time on research as this, to consolidate it into 15 minutes exactly is really quite a challenge, and I'm very grateful to all of you. Do we have any questions? I will facilitate them. If you could come up to the microphone and ask a question, say your name, your affiliation, and if you have a specific question for one of the presenters, that would be great. If not, I have questions, so I'm sure they'd rather you ask them. Any questions? Oh, go ahead up to the microphone, please, because we're being recorded.
Hi, my name is Tatiana Nekrasova-Beka from Colorado State University. Thank you very much all for wonderful presentations. And I have a question about for the last presenter. How did you operationalize the instances of humor? Because looking at your transcripts, I would have a hard time, honestly, myself, to identify those instances and kind of justify, is there a scale or a taxonomy or something? That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your question. Yeah, we looked at, first, we made sure that the teacher intended to be, whatever the teacher said intended to be humorous. So sometimes we say something and all of a sudden people laugh and we didn't even mean it to be humorous. So those were disregarded. And also we look at the whole paralinguistic and prosodic and discourse markers. So for example, the use of nonverbal language, and in the case of Arthur, when he's at a romantic date, he clearly, you can say, it was like the face and the intonation of the voice, it was clear that he was teasing the student. So that's how we identified humorous sequences.
And is this something that you then clarified in those interviews with the instructors?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
And then, so once you identify those instances in the transcript, Was it something that you then clarified with the instructors during those interviews?
Not for every single one of them, but sometimes Rachel is the one who did the interviews and she had the video recordings. So sometimes she would say, she would show some instances to the teacher and ask about the teacher to confirm that we were doing it right, but not with all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Oh, yep, so please go up to the mic to ask the question. Name, institution, please.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. My name is Tamara Petrashova. I am from Russia, from Tomsk Polytechnic University. And well, I have a question to the second presenter related to self-assessment. Well, could you please specify or just give some information related to the procedures or just the structure? What kind of self-assessment will you imply? No. Yeah,
Me?
two.
To me.
No,
To whom?
the first one, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so the self-assessment, I use it in the language strategies and the form. So basically, it's just regular the Likert scale. So for example, she can self-assess like how frequent I use Chinese at work. And the first category is like occasionally, and second probably sometimes, and then frequently. So she basically marked for each one. Yeah. Is this the instrument that you are interested in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so basically just there are different categories, and also for her language strategies, she basically just recall like how much I feel like this week I talked to my coworkers and supervisor, approximately how many hours. So she just put down and list all the numbers and hours.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Kelly Arispan from Boise State University. I have a question for Diego, the second presenter. If you could talk to us a little bit about, or give us a heads up for the linguistic. I know you were just talking about the socio-affective measures that you were looking at with the heritage speakers, but what are some of the other aspects of that community service engagement that the students engaged in, and what were you looking at from a linguistic perspective?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good one. So we basically did an interview at the beginning of the semester. We are planning on doing an interview at the end of the semester. However, in the exams or in the search that we also did at the beginning and in the middle and now, we haven't seen any increase or any improvement in the linguistic side of it. By linguistic, I mean the use of specific properties. Obviously, there's the lexical gains. There's lexical gains, and then they report that they are able to use Spanish in different contexts that they didn't use before. However, no gains in linguistic properties per se. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
We still have time for one or two more questions. So if no one else has a question, I wanted to ask our first two speakers. I really liked the way you talked about service learning and the planning aspect and so on. How do you think you could incorporate some of what we did for self-assessment and planning in the first study with what you were doing, Diego, in your study with your students? So how to engage some of the instruments that that were used in the first study in, maybe they could be incorporated into the kind of program that you were working on?
So in this is, in 50 minutes, I was only able to present a very small portion of it, but we did take lots of surveys, assessments, particularly with regards to use of the language beyond the home environment and the classroom environment, which up to that moment is what they were used to. And what we see is that yes, they feel more comfortable going outside in the community and using Spanish. But again, for them that we don't see linguistic gains lexical, and the new affordances to use Spanish in other places. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? I think we're right on time. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you to our researchers and presenters. And one of our articles is already out, and I'm sure you'll be seeing the other two soon in Foreign Language Annals. Thank you.